Cancel culture is a toxic practice that has to be done away with, and I'll be telling you why. I'm Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. In North America, society is highly polarized, and that isn't even debatable. It's an easily observable fact. People are at each other's throats, and they do this if you don't conform to their preconceived thought tribe. If you don't think like someone, they might tend to view you as a villain. And that's how we've been trained. And there is blame to be cast on social media, the media, and just our toxic practices like cancel culture. We have deviated from the norm of viewing somebody who has a different set of ideas as a fellow country person, but now we're viewing them as an enemy. And that's not good. A country that's divided within itself doesn't have much of a future. Today, let's try and iron out a glaring flaw in the way we choose to handle disagreements, and that is cancel culture. Now you may be wondering, what exactly is that? There seems to be, even here, things that we can't agree on, such as what it is. To me, cancel culture really comes down to viewing someone who, as I mentioned before, isn't a part of your thought tribe in a hostile way. And your response to that disagreement is trying to it's really trying to dish out a punishment upon them, trying to get them removed from their job, trying to make people not shop at them anymore if they're a corporation, and overall, just trying to bury them, canceling them, trying to remove them from their current position and place them somewhere lower. Now, there are distinctions here, and there's a lot of nuance as well. As you may have heard, people try to cancel individuals, they try to cancel corporations, there's some issues there, and there's even a justification to be made given certain types of boycotts and whatnot. And maybe we should begin there. Let's start by talking about the corporation and what a justified boycott looks like versus what the toxic practice of cancel culture is currently manifesting as. So, first of all, there's a difference between a company policy and an individual employee saying something. For example, if it's the company's policy to not serve a certain race, then yes, boycotting that is a good idea. I would actually support it. If it's a company policy to be abusing underage children in foreign countries to create their products, then yes, I would support a boycott on that as well. Because it's a company policy. You can think of that as the software that powers the entire machine, which the machine in this case would be the corporation, and the ideologies they run on are their policy. Now, here's what happens today though. You will find an independent cog, one piece of the entity, an employee, who says something. They might say, for example, that they like the President of the United States. They might say they like Trudeau. They might say they voted for Andrew Scheer. They might say they voted for Jagmeet Singh. They could say a variety of things, that they like Bernie Sanders, whatever it may be. They may even talk about certain politics like immigration and whatnot. People can have opinions on that kind of stuff, but today, it's becoming less tolerable. If you say something like that, and people recognize that you represent a company, they will come for you, and they will do it via threatening the company. They'll say, hey, Walmart, one of your staff said this, they acted in this way, and therefore we're going to boycott you. But you must ask yourself, is that appropriate? First of all, from the company's standpoint, is it a corporate policy what they're talking about? Is it something the company is really at fault for? Or is it the free will of one of their employees? Usually it's the employee acting on their own. And the second part also is look at the employee or the individual. Is what they're saying really that heinous? Are they calling for violence? Are they inciting a tremendous amount of hate? Or are they expressing a logical viewpoint that you just don't agree with? Usually, it seems to be, once again, people are defaulting to the latter in that equation. They're taking out their rage on people who, by any logical standard, are not worth canceling. As I've made clear, I hope, I'm not against certain boycotts or going against companies for things that are worth it. But we have to better differentiate between what is and what isn't. The lines are being blurred here to a tremendous degree, and the reasons why we're canceling companies or people today are just silly. Then even if we remove the company from the equation and we just see an individual who is posting something that we don't like, when is it appropriate to cancel them? If I have to really think about that, it seems to me there's one instance where it's appropriate. That is, if what they're saying comes with a heavy bias that will severely impact their job function. For example, if they are a doctor or a surgeon and they say something like, "I hate a certain group of people," well, that's pretty much a conflict because you're going to be serving a lot of people as a surgeon. You don't get to pick your clientele. And if you have to operate and we find out that you have a strong bias towards a certain group, that could be a problem, especially if it's going to impact your job performance and put people's lives at risk. There might be a good cause for pushing forward this type of cancellation. Now, here's where we come into some blurry lines though, and I don't know if they should even be that blurry. If you have a doctor, in the same example, who says something like he voted for President Trump, I don't think that's worthy of canceling. Now, some people might impute certain motives to the doctor. They may say, oh, he voted for Trump because he is racist, or he is this, or he is that, but we don't know that. These aren't even firm conclusions. They're based on insufficient evidence. It's not like in the first example where they've incriminated themselves, where they've exposed their own bias. Here, we are attributing our own biases to the individual. And that's not right. That's not how we can sustain ourselves as a country. There's no future down this road. And unfortunately, canceling is following the later pattern again. It's not the former example, most of the time. This is the fundamental problem with cancel culture. We're not properly calibrating our detectors. There are instances where we can all agree that what's happened here is worthy of condemnation, but instead, we're creating the biggest net possible and we're casting it very wide. People who shouldn't be canceled by any logical standards are being canceled. And the trend's getting worse and worse, not getting better. The arbitrary guidelines that we hold in terms of deeming whether or not someone is worthy of being destroyed, it's getting looser. That's the wrong direction to be moving in. Now, here are some more examples of cancellation in just recent history. It's been going on for quite some time. People are going after the Goya Foods president with a bloodlust. Why? Because he said America is blessed to have a leader like Trump. Well, that's his opinion. This is his personal political take. And roughly 40% of that country likely feels the same way based on how they voted. We're just driving a massive wedge between two large factions of America by behaving like this. So he likes President Trump. So what? What does that mean? Once again, you can impute motives to him, but we don't know if it's true. You might say, oh, he likes Trump because he's racist or because he hates that and this and this and this, but we don't know that. There's a wide variety of reasons why you may like him, and you don't have to like him. It's just his opinion. And you can change his mind too. If you really feel like he's mistaken, wouldn't the better course of action be to explain why? To get him to change his mind? To bring him to your side? When you cancel someone, you don't do that. You harden their beliefs and you make them indignant. It's a failure of the pattern I described before. For Goya Foods to be canceled, show me the corporate policy that's in question here. But there isn't one. It's just the president saying something political and us not liking it. And therefore we want to take revenge on his company, which would hurt him, hurt the company, and probably hurt the employees too, who are quite innocent in the matter. It's almost like we're not thinking here, especially about the damage that we'd be causing by being sanctimonious. Now, another example is Terry Crews. He is being attacked by the cancellation mob because he dared to question the Black Lives Matter movement. He essentially said, yes, Black lives do matter. Everyone would agree with that, but he said we have to look deeper at the organization though. You can name yourself one thing, and that's very powerful. The message is clear. Black lives do matter. There's no debate here. But what the organization actually does though, that can be different. And he had some questions about that. But it didn't matter. He still got attacked by the cancellation mob because what he was saying was not compatible with their worldview. And aside from these big names, there's a plethora of them. J.K. Rowling, for example. Regular people are being canceled as well. It's either they tweet something, they say something, or they have a picture resurfaced from decades ago, and we really have to figure out a logical rule book for processing this information. I draw the logical line at calling or inciting for violence. If someone does that, then we have a problem. If you aren't calling for these types of things or breaking our already established laws, like slander and such, canceling someone can't be the right move. And I'll touch more on why and give my list of negatives of the practice in a bit, but first, let's talk more about people who've been canceled. There is a young lady who posted a TikTok of her saying that she will kill someone who says all lives matter, or something like that. And as a result, she got fired from her job. Now, I get it. She was probably trying to be funny. TikTok is like a meme community. And she did incite violence, though. Her life is now destroyed. Is that right? Technically, she did commit a grave ill. But I think even here, she should be given the chance to apologize and make amends, clear up what exactly was going on. Try to explain herself and give a apology and try to explain how she was willing to change her ways. Because her life did get ruined. That's pretty massive here. And we shouldn't be taking it so lightly. There is a degree of compassion that has to be had when dealing with our fellow people. Everybody is flawed to a degree. If we're not willing to give people the benefit of the doubt, the chance to change and the chance to be forgiven, I'm not too sure where we're heading as a society. To abandon those practices of compassion is a terrible move. And there's also a plethora of people who are just voicing standard political points, but because they aren't woke enough, they're being sent to the guillotine. Professors are one job that I notice are being targeted to a large degree. And here's one example. A University of Chicago economics prof was targeted because he criticized the call to defund police. He questioned the validity of it, and he thought it was a silly idea. And because of that, people are calling for him to be removed, to get taken off whatever academic panels he's on. And it just seems silly to me. Look at what we've become. And before we move any further, I want to share a quote from Obama about the challenges that come up with cancel culture and why it has to be abandoned. He says it quite well. It's an amazing quote. Here it is.
You know, this idea of purity and you're never compromised and you're always politically woke and all that stuff, you should get over that quickly. The world is messy. There are ambiguities. Yep. People who do really good stuff have flaws. Right. People who you are fighting may love their kids. And, you know, share certain things with you. And I think that one danger I see among young people, particularly on college campuses, Malia and I talk about this. Yara goes to school with my daughter. But I do get a sense sometimes now among certain young people, and this is accelerated by social media, there is this sense sometimes of the way of me making change is to be as judgmental as possible about other people. And that's enough. Like if I tweet or hashtag about how you didn't do something right or used the wrong verb, or then I can sit back and feel pretty good about myself. Because, man, you see how woke I was? I called you out. Let me get on TV, watch my show, watch Grownish. You know, that's not activism. That's not bringing about change. You know, if all you're doing is casting stones, you know, you're probably not going to get that far. That's easy to do.
That right there is 100% correct, and it's a very admirable speech to be giving, especially when saying something like that can get you canceled as well. We need to get over this, as Obama says. People are acting sanctimonious because they feel they have some type of moral superiority over who they deem to be the enemy. They are looking for reasons to divide themselves instead of finding common ground. As he said, you guys probably have a lot of things in common, but you're not looking for it. Instead, you're looking for reasons to divide yourselves, and that's terrible. And this really hits the nail on the head regarding many of these so-called activists that I see. Obama says the way to make change that they feel is to be as judgmental as possible about other people. That's not activism. It's being an upright jerk, and you're not doing anything. You're just being a prick, basically. And if you're religious, it's akin to the Pharisees during the time of Jesus. They're putting on a grand display. They're trying to show the world how good they are, how woke they are, but there's no forethought into what they're actually doing. They're just casting stones, and they're not producing any positive change. They're just hardening people. This is the wrong way to go about it. And anyone with any intelligence can tell you that. But unfortunately, we're too caught up in the whims of social media to see this. There is no doubt in my mind that social media has just perpetuated the issue to an unmanageable degree. There are so many downsides here. First of all, there's the constant news that triggers you all the time. You can create a closed echo chamber that radicalizes you. Nobody's there telling you that you're wrong because they're afraid of the backlash. There is a dominant norm on social media platforms, and it depends on the platform that you're on, but there is a rhetoric there. And it's going to be what you're fed. And it's very hard to challenge it. It's a recipe for tearing a country apart. And on top of that, you can act as evil as you want on social media, and you don't get to see the consequences. You're talking to someone behind a screen. You don't get to see them crying if you hurt their feelings. You don't get to see them in shambles because you've destroyed their lives. You don't see it. You stay in your bubble of sanctimony. It's unearned moral superiority, and I'm sure you feel amazing about it, about going after these people for having a different opinion than you, and you feel amazing that you serve them up, that you cripple them, that you destroy their ability to provide for their family. But should you really be feeling good about that? Is that really what activism boils down to today? I agree with Obama. You're just being silly, a child, almost infantile with your way of thinking. If that's how you see the world, you have to change. And I hope that I'll get through to you throughout this podcast. Now, I want to move on to a quote from my upcoming book. I talk about cancel culture for a segment there. The book is releasing soon. I'm not sure the exact date just yet. I'm just wrapping up a couple of edits here and there. So stay tuned for more details on that. But here's the piece. So this pillar rings strong. Here I'm talking, so the book is a bunch of pillars that I've developed to help people live a more fulfilling life. And this pillar here is talking about trying to love other people to the best of our ability. And I say this pillar rings strong when dealing with modern phenomenon like cancel culture. It is easy to find ourselves infuriated with people who think differently. It bewilders us that someone can exist with what we perceive to be irrational perspectives. Interestingly, that person may feel the exact same way about us. There are definite lines to be drawn, but the borders have shrunk undoubtedly as of late. How much charity should we be willing to give other people? I believe we should give the maximum amount. After all, hatred breeds more hatred. Revenge breeds further revenge. If there was any lesson of the past to heed, this would be it. Yet, we ignore it. Important queries seem to escape us. You must wonder, are you dealing with a well-intentioned person? Do you both desire goodness but differ in terms of which path is ideal? Is there a reason why they feel the way they do? Could you be wrong? Is there a middle ground? Is canceling, rather than educating, the best approach? In all but the most heinous cases, certainly, we can rediscover compassion for those outside of our thought tribes. The validity of abandoning a toxic practice like cancel culture becomes even more obvious when we look at the outcomes. To love someone is to desire the best for them. If you believe that an individual truly has the wrong idea, what good is attempting to destroy them? They will continue to wallow in wrongness and perhaps even harden their beliefs. They will feel indignant towards you. They will embolden their views and renew their mission. Instead, we would all be better off by regaining respect for debate and speech. Logic is one thread that can unite us all. It does not care about your individual background. If you choose to be logical, you instantly tune into the same frequency as other logical people. Once this happens, we can begin to convince each other of the best ideas. One must have a willing mind, though, to express why one stance is wrong and another is right, to move closer towards the truth. Even if someone refuses to enter the realm of logic, trying to explain a counter-argument might be enough to convert them. We accomplish only one thing by canceling somebody. We widen the gap between ourselves, all while raising the temperature, the polarization, and the rage that is already far too intense. If we cannot change these counterproductive responses, I worry about our future. And that briefly summarizes my entire stance on the topic of cancel culture. It's not tenable. It's toxic, and we shouldn't be making it our norm. It might already be the norm, but we have to work towards changing it. It's just not how we move forward together. It's how we divide ourselves and destroy our countries. Now, this is probably a good segue into reasons why cancel culture is horrible. I've talked about it before, but here let's actually pin down the points. First, it literally destroys people's lives, takes away their career, and leaves them unable to support their family. That's where we've seen cancel culture go to the extreme. Think about if what the person has done really calls for that before you try to cancel them. Online, it seems that it's easy enough to do it without seeing the aftermath. It takes quite the disgusting person to actively wish this reality upon people who simply differ politically. You shouldn't be seeking to destroy them because of that, but that's how deep the toxicity has run. And it's coming from these supposed activists too, who are morally superior. Well, they're not. Second, does this weak brand of activism do anything? If you destroy someone's life or their company or their dreams, are they going to magically change their mind and think you're correct? Are they going to say, oh yeah, you've shown me the way by crippling me? No, they will harden their beliefs and become bitter. They will think you're just crazy. And they're going to fight even that much harder against you now. Having a conversation is going to become impossible because these stakes are so high. You haven't changed anybody's mind. You made the issue worse. Further, it will likely fuel people in the middle who have not chosen a side yet to abandon your cause because of how draconian you seem to be. Third, it creates a toxic environment where any challenge of the supposed social norm is met with harsh consequences. People will then feel afraid to speak up. We already see it on university campuses, a place that was once meant for debate and academic progress. Now, if you aren't woke enough, you aren't welcome. And that goes for professors and students too. Does that produce the best path forward? I sincerely doubt it. You lose the opposition, and that was meant to strengthen your own argument and ideas, and you're unable to weed out the bad ones now, because nobody is there to challenge you. You're going to believe that everything you say is true, even though you lack evidence because you've never been trained. And when reality hits you in the face, you're not ready for it. It's a terrible way to set up the future generations. We haven't safeguarded the integrity of academia and some of the core tenets that our country holds dear, like free speech. There are so many consequences now for just thinking and talking, and it's not imposed by the government per se. It's the masses having the wrong idea about punishment. And fourth, North America is already fast polarizing and tearing itself apart. Just look around. If you want to speed things up, you can start to threaten people's livelihoods over their politics. It isn't just trolling online anymore. It's real now. Before you get into an argument on Twitter, it would end and you might feel bad about it, but you move on. Now though, you risk everything. That will crank the temperature up undoubtedly. Once again, is that good for the country? No. Will it even bring about change? I doubt it. No ideas have been exchanged here. It's just terror. It's fear. It's trying to suppress you. That's not how you bring about a grassroots change, and I'm surprised they don't know this. It literally does nothing productive, but it lets you feel good about yourself because you're woke. You can show the whole world that. You make that trade-off at your own peril. Now let's move on to AOC. She's a prominent American politician, and she chimed in on this issue, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And her response was probably the most clueless thing I've seen. She says this: the term cancel culture comes from entitlement, as though the person complaining has the right to a large captive audience and one is a victim if people choose to tune them out. She has a second part to it too, but let's start with this. What to even say to that? It's just so misguided. It's almost akin to the people who say climate change is not real. She is a certain type of denial coming from the left here. She's basically saying cancel culture is not even real. It's just a privilege. It's an entitlement that you feel though that you deserve to have an audience. Well, that might be true for celebrities, but I'm talking more about the individual people who are getting canceled for tweeting something or having an opinion. Those people aren't talking about any audience there. They're talking about their livelihoods. And that even goes for celebrities too. She's talking as if that all they care about is having an audience listen to them. And that when people choose to not listen, that's cancel culture. No, that's not it. Cancel culture goes beyond that. It goes beyond simply turning off your monitor. It goes into the personal. It goes into you trying to destroy them, trying to get rid of their future career prospects to end their current ones, to make sure they never talk again, to make sure they have no platform. That is cancel culture. What she's talking about here is an entirely different response, and she's painting it as if that's what cancel culture is. To simply ignore someone because they say something you don't like. That's fine. But it's not what we're talking about here. It's just utter confusion. And the funny thing to me is that she talks a lot about privilege and whatnot. It's actually a privilege to not feel the brunt of cancel culture. For you to think that cancel culture is only simply not listening to people and not having an audience, well, that's fine, but it just goes to speak to the fact that you haven't experienced what it truly is, that you can't relate to the people who've lost their jobs because of something political. Not even something heinous per se. The borders as to what you can and cannot say have shrunk. And she is unaware of that? That's crazy from a politician. Then the next part of her tweet goes like this: odds are you're not actually cancelled, you're just being challenged, held accountable, or unliked. Well, if that was the truth, then we wouldn't really have a problem here. First of all, if someone were to challenge you, that's perfect. I actually advocate for that. But I have the brains to see that that's not what's happening. You aren't simply being challenged here, you're being decimated. Second, held accountable. Once again, that is fine. If you say something, hold them accountable. Ask them what they mean. Ask questions, get a conversation started. That goes with challenging. That's where we should be moving to. And the third point, maybe you're just unliked. Well, that's fine as well. Nobody's saying to like everyone. This is just a confusion. It's almost like a straw man that she's built here. She's erected a false image of cancel culture, and she's saying, as a result, there's nothing to worry about. Well, AOC, if it was as you described, then yes, I would agree with you, but that's not the case here. It's a grand illusion that's being painted. Now, finally, in cancel culture news, Harper's magazine created an open letter condemning cancel culture. It was supported by a bunch of people, including celebrities like J.K. Rowling, who is quite notorious these days. And guess what? People tried to cancel the anti-cancel letter. You can't make this stuff up. Everything is getting canceled. And the funny part to me, again, is the letter is clearly from a leftist point of view. They call out the right and they label them as the other. And they say we don't want to be like them and the left has to do better, etc. And that's fine. It's actually quite the good letter. But despite that, the far left still couldn't stomach it. And actually here, I have to be fair, I've seen quite the debate even internally among those who you would probably consider to be further on the left in terms of the political spectrum. Some of them actually don't like cancel culture. They see the evils of it, but there are some there too who love it. So it's not really a far left issue per se. There are people there who don't support it, and I see them posting and fighting back. But there are those who are there who are even louder than them, who are advocating for it and pushing it. So it might not be a political issue, it might be a personality one. Those who tend towards a petty authoritarianism, or they like to destroy people's lives or whatever, those are the ones who are really pushing the cancel culture. So I won't even say that it's truly a far left issue. It happens across the spectrum, and maybe it's more tied to a personality trait. Because we do see it on the right as well, but the whole thing has to go regardless of how it stems. Now, this article isn't too long. It's worth the read. And I'll highlight some key points right now. It says, this needed reckoning has also intensified a new set of moral attitudes and political commitments that tend to weaken our norms of open debate and toleration of differences in favor of ideological conformity. That is true. Ideological conformity is the only way to not get canceled these days. It's a form of oppression, really. And people are going to be angry about that, but it's true. When you try to destroy someone for thinking something different than you, you're actively oppressing their ideas. It's not the way to go. We had a norm of open debate. That was the ideal solution because the ideas battle each other and the best one comes out on top. If you really do feel so strongly about your ideas, let's talk about it. Let's debate. Why even cancel? You can convert these people and those who disagree with you by talking about it. But instead you seek to destroy them. And I wonder why. Maybe because you're not even that secure about your own intuitions that you feel they can't survive a conversation. That's why you resort to this drastic solution. Who really knows what's behind the mindset there? And moving on, the article goes on to say the forces of illiberalism are gaining strength throughout the world. And this is true. We live in a liberal society, but that's fast changing to a draconian one, to an authoritarian one. We see the cracks in the wall. When you can no longer express yourself without fear of consequences, that's not quite liberal anymore. When free speech is being cracked down upon, that's not quite liberal anymore. There are classical liberal values that we've had, and they're being thrown away under the guise of liberalism, but it's not true. It's illiberalism, and we have to recognize that. We're not going to really truly see the value of these things until they're gone, and then it'll be too late. Now the article goes on. The democratic inclusion we want can be achieved only if we speak out against the intolerant climate that has set in on all sides. And that's true, it is on all sides. The left, the right, maybe even in the middle. People aren't hearing each other anymore. There is no debate, it's only one-way track of mind thinking. They're ideologues, they think one thing is true, and that's it. There's no room for debate, they can't be wrong, and they're going to harden their beliefs and they're going to attack you for thinking differently. That's not how we move forward. The next quote, "The free exchange of information and ideas, the lifeblood of a liberal society, is daily becoming more constricted." That's true. Look around you. It's not becoming less restricted, that's for sure. The goalposts are shrinking to an unmanageable degree. What can get you canceled? The list 10 years ago was probably a lot smaller than it is today. And tomorrow it'll probably be bigger. And a year from now it'll be bigger. If we don't do anything to stop that and really put together a concrete list of things that are truly worthy of being canceled over, we're going to be lost because the loud minority is running the show right now. And nobody can challenge them because they have fear over you. You feel like if you say something that doesn't conform with the new norms around you, you're going to face the consequences. And that might be true. You might be right about that. But that's not a norm we can uphold. The only way forward is to fight against that because it's not liberal. It's coming from a draconian place, and that's not welcome in a country like this. We should be happy about differences. We should be welcoming diversity. But I guess that only works when it fits your agenda. Diversity here, is it a good thing? They don't seem to think so. That's terrible. Now, the next quote. "An intolerance of opposing views, a vogue for public shaming and ostracism, and the tendency to dissolve complex policy issues in a blinding moral certainty." So true. So well put. That's all it comes down to. The moral superiority complex. Even something as complex as a policy issue is being boiled down to a one-liner on an Instagram story. And then we wonder why there's so much confusion, so much chaos, and so much wrath. Because nobody knows the full story. Because all they're being fed is what the social media algorithm shows them. You have to do some research and understand there is nuance everywhere. Now, the next line. "Editors are fired for running controversial pieces, books that were drawn for alleged inauthenticity. Journalists are barred from writing on certain topics. Professors are investigated for quoting works of literature in class. A researcher is fired for circulating a peer-reviewed academic study. And the heads of organizations are ousted for what are sometimes just clumsy mistakes. We are already paying the price in greater risk aversion among writers, artists, and journalists who fear for their livelihoods if they depart from the consensus or even lack sufficient zeal in agreement." So true, and so telling of where we're going. I think that last piece there really highlights it too. There is a real fear that you can lose everything if you don't buy into what the mob is saying, and it just highlights how silly AOC is, talking about her amidst of cancel culture. She is so misguided here. People really fear about what can happen to them if they don't toe the line. And even that's not acceptable. You can toe the line and still get canceled. Some people even want you to agree enthusiastically. It's not just enough to be neutral or to say you're right. You have to say you're right and scream it from the mountaintops, to beat your chest and proclaim it like you have the holy word of God. That's what it's coming down to. And as I said before, it's not tenable. It's petty authoritarianism, and if not stopped, this can go to a very dark place. I don't think I have to read any more from the article. You probably get the point by now. The reality is pretty grim. This here is an idiotic trend that only the most sanctimonious among us are basking in. It should never have gotten this far, but it has, because we're not speaking up. And I don't even think it's the majority who likes it, it's just those who are the loudest are running the show. They are also very clearly power tripping on their, whatever it is, perceived sense of authority now. They're wreaking havoc. It's absolutely disgusting behavior and it has to stop. And the only way we stop it is by talking about it. By not succumbing to the fears that they're imposing. If I was a cancel culture fanatic, I would probably say something silly like, let's get these people back by canceling them too. But I'm not. An eye for an eye is not going to work out here. I want the behavior corrected, and I've tried to lay out a compelling argument as to why. The only way forward is together, and if we continue to tear ourselves apart At the seams, I don't think there's a future here. We have to find a way to bring down the temperature. Things are too hot. We are at a boiling point, and we continue to make it worse, and the current trajectory is going to lead us to a dark place. Maybe even a civil war, if pushed to the extreme. And why would you want that? There are better ways to go about bringing change, as Obama said. You being as judgmental as possible to other people and destroying them isn't really bringing change. You're making things worse. If you really want to change the ideas of your peers, gain a respect again for free speech and debate and logic, and we can talk about it. And you can win people over the right way. Hopefully, those who are advocates of cancel culture hear me out, and also the many other people who are saying things that need to be heard, who see the cracks in the wall, and we're trying to fix it before it's too late. The likes of AOC are not helping that cause, though. Only time will tell how we come out of this, but I do have hope. I do believe that we will find the courage to rise up and bring back the norms of liberal society that truly made us a great place to live, that drew people to come here, that gave the promise of a country that wouldn't be ruled by fear. We're moving away from that to an illiberal society. And as someone who does believe in classical liberal concepts, that's a true shame. So, I'll keep you up to date on how this progresses. And with that, we come to the end of our talk for today. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review and share. That'll help us grow. And you can find me online at perryplatform.org and on social media at perryplatform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.